Hey, thanks for joining us on another episode of Construction Tech Talk. This is another We Talk to Smart People episodes where I've got my friend Jonathan Gross, attorney, software expert, and emotional support Canadian. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. Pleasure to be here again, as always.
Well, Jonathan has been talking to us about things like the legal terms and conditions to look at when it comes to enterprise software in your contracting business. But today we're going to define some terms. And these are terms that have to do with where software is housed, how it's provisioned, how it's sold, how it's paid for, and how it's built. So it's kind of confusing. So, Jonathan, I'm not sure if you know who Dave Kellogg is.
For sure.
I mean, I've been reading his stuff for years, and I remember how many years back there was this blog post he had about how he's talking to the principal of an enterprise software business. And he asked the guy, "Well, are you guys on perpetual license or subscription?" And the guy says, "Hey, man, I'm on a perpetual money model. I think they ought to take the guy who invented the perpetual license and string him up." So, really, when it comes right down to it, one reason that multi tenant software as a service is the direction the industry is going has to do with the fact that that vendor doesn't want to leave money on the table, but there's more to it. So let's help folks understand the difference between these and what it is that it means for them as they figure out which way they're going to jump when it comes to technology.
Yeah, this is such an interesting discussion. And boy, the marketing around cloud is, well, let's say cloudy. And so companies are going to come in and they're going to call their system SaaS or multi-tenant SaaS or single-tenant SaaS, but does it really pass the test? And what is the test? Well, the U.S. Department of Commerce has a division called the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And they have laid out a 5-point test here. The first thing to note is that the cloud, something to be truly cloud, needs to be rapidly elastic to meet demand. So if the vendor brings on 50 more customers, well, the system needs to scale. You have to scale computing capacity. You have to scale resources to meet the demand. If you all of a sudden want to consume a lot more resources because your business has doubled overnight, then it should scale to meet that. The cloud system needs to be able to be self-service on demand. So if you want to add more computing power, if you want to add more resources, well, you can't have an army of engineers behind the scenes trying to spin things up for you. So it's got to be available on demand. It leverages pooled resources. So that means multiple customers or consumers of the application are sharing a common pool of resources. Could be infrastructure, could be databases, could be applications. Depends on the type of SaaS or cloud we're talking about. It needs to be accessible through the internet. So one tip, if something is being marketed as SaaS and you have to VPN in to a remote server and basically have a desktop sitting on another server, chances are it ain't cloud. And then the fifth requirement, according to NIST, is that it's automatically measured. So the system is automatically scanning itself and monitoring how its resources are being utilized. So that's generally cloud in those 5 key criteria. Now, the question is all cloud SaaS? No. A lot of companies, think of Microsoft and Amazon with AWS, they sell computing power as cloud. And so it's not software as a service, it's infrastructure as a service. So the question is, what is SaaS? Well, SaaS is bringing the cloud requirements up to the application level. So that's your business software that is being delivered in a way that meets those 5 requirements. It's metered, the resources are pooled, et cetera, et cetera. It's accessible through broad internet access. So in other words, I open up Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome and I go to the web address and that's my software right there. And so the reason why companies want to move to SaaS is because, well, the vendor does a lot of the management. They manage the entire stack up and down. So they're managing, yes, the infrastructure, They're managing the platform, things like databases and things that allow the software application to run on the infrastructure, and then the application itself. And so if you think about why it's beneficial, well, now all of a sudden, many companies don't need an IT army to manage infrastructure or making sure that the applications and the databases and the infrastructure talk together. You're basically outsourcing that to the software provider. And that's important. Does it mean companies don't need IT resources? No, of course not. They are going to need IT resources for things like systems administration and to improve business processes, but you're effectively outsourcing the keep the lights on stuff to your technology provider. Now, I guess the question you asked, Chuck, and I'm working my way to it, I'm getting there. I'm a little slow, but I'm building up here, is, well, what's this deal with single tenant SaaS and multi-tenant SaaS, and why do customers care about it? I mean,
Yeah, well, I think to a certain extent it's because single tenant SaaS, I think we still have some people who may feel that having their business on the same instance of software with other businesses is fundamentally less secure. We're also seeing in the construction space a lot of multi-tenant SaaS vendors beginning to open up their application stack to that finance company that wants to sell you gap financing, that attorney who wants to help you collect, all of these different ancillary services, which might be great, but at a time where folks are wondering if their Alexa's spying on them, they might not have very good feelings about that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So, really, what's the difference between single tenant and multi-tenant SaaS, and why do you care? For exactly the stuff that Chuck's talking about, single tenant SaaS means you've got your own application that's deployed as a single tenant. You get your own specific deployment of the software. So it means you're not sharing it with the construction engineering firm across the hall or who you may be competing against. You get your own. I mean, the thing to note is that even if you do share the tenancy, there are strong virtual walls separating you. So in the multi-tenant, I mean, there's really very little risk of anything bleeding over from one company to another. So you don't really need to worry about that. You do have to assess how those walls are built to a certain extent. But the theory behind why a single tenant application might be beneficial as well, you get your own version of the application, your own instance. So you have perhaps arguably a bit more control as to when you can push out updates. Other things you can do in the application that you might not be able to do because they would have to deploy those changes to perhaps multiple customers. So perhaps you get a little bit more control over it, a little bit more flexibility over it, but theoretically you should be paying a price for that as well. Because again, you're talking about now having resources that are perhaps a little bit more dedicated to you from the software provider because they have to support your specific instance and they have to support another customer specific deployment of the software and so on and so forth. Multi-tenant, the theory is that the economics should be more favorable because the vendor can deploy fewer resources to support broader customer base because they're supporting one application code base and a much less variability from customer to customer.
So, in terms of the heavy lifting that someone might have to do, I mean, if I'm looking at a single tenant applications and the vendor is shipping an update, which, God willing, they should be doing like all the time. Are there things where I might have to go through some regression testing or do some work on my end to make sure that that update won't break anything that I have? And is that something I might not have to worry about at all with multi-tenant SaaS?
Well, I think you have to worry about it regardless because you have your own specific configuration of the software and you might have done some within the confines of what the software lets you to do. You're going to carve your path through it. So before you push anything out into your live environment, you're going to want to test it. So what the vendor's going to do, whether it's single tenant or multi-tenant, is they're going to deliver to you updates and patches that you're going to want to run through development and test environments to make sure it doesn't break anything, just like you said, before you push it to production. Thing with multi-tenant SaaS is, those updates are going to come out at a cadence. I think there's this psychological requirement for companies to stay current and adopt new functionality because you have to take it by a certain time. And so you can delay an update for a certain period of time, but because part of the economics, part of the business model is making sure everyone's kind of on a common plane, you're going to have to deploy it. So it does, in some ways, pressure companies to innovate and put some thought into how they want to improve their business so they can continue to take advantage of the benefits of SaaS. Again, that's one of the huge selling points is you're getting the latest and greatest functionality. You're getting the latest and greatest security patches, and there's a requirement to stay evergreen on that stuff. And so companies, in some cases, are using this to say, hey, I'm going to stay innovative and I'm going to continuously improve. And that's one of the reasons why I'm buying a SaaS application.
Now, at the other end, I mean, we've been talking about the difference between single tenant and multi-tenant, but what we're seeing a lot in the construction space right now is mature solutions that have been offered on premise for decades, and they're well developed, they're deeper in functionality than a lot of these SaaS products that are coming up. But they were developed on premise, and then maybe that vendor placed them in like a cloud hosting environment. Um, what are the value differences between something like that and something like a single tenant application that, frankly, that vendor might be able to, stand up a new instance like that? Um, you know, what are the reasons one might opt for single tenant versus a hosted solution or vice versa?
Yeah, so there are a lot of great business applications out in the marketplace that, like you say, are quite mature, that have been developed over 15, 20, 25 years and have a really robust code base. And so it takes a lot of work to rewrite that stuff for the cloud and could take years and years and years to do it. So what some vendors are doing are saying, look, we want to help our client relieve some of the IT administration headaches. So what we're going to do is we're going to host the system for them on servers that we choose. So now we're saying to our customer, okay, you don't have to worry about buying servers in a data center. We're going to take that lift for you, and we might even manage it for you. So when our software development arm, our technical development arm releases a patch or an update or something like that, we're going to apply it to the application that we're hosting for you. Oftentimes, these applications aren't pure cloud. So they're basically going to be charging you a managed services fee or some type of fee that says we're going to just take on the management of the application. But it's the same idea. It's the same software application, just running on different servers. And if it's more of a client server application, well, chances are you're going to remote desktop into the server, and you're going to be operating the software on someone else's server as opposed to logging into a web browser from anywhere, anytime. So there is a little bit more complexity with access, and you're not getting the full cloud benefit with that type of application. You're just really getting a portion of the benefit, which you're going to ultimately pay for by having someone else manage the plumbing system that supports the system.
So when it comes to making long-term decisions about applications running in a business, when it comes to someone in a net new sales environment subscribing to a hosted solution, which, in the old days we called that managed services. What are some of the different things that will, kind of tip people off that that's what they're looking at as opposed to like a single tenancy? And, do you think that they're going to be, able to still run that thing like 5, 10 years down the road?
Yeah, you may be able to run them for a while, but I guess the question you have to ask yourself is it going to get in the way of my business value? And so, things to think about. If I've got a whole bunch of people running around job sites who need mobile access, well, can I access this thing through a browser or through some type of mobile application? That's the first clue that it may or may not be a cloud ready or cloud based system. The other thing is how easy is it to connect to other systems? And so one of the beauties of a lot of these modern systems is that they're what's called open architecture. So you can connect them to all different types of applications to create business process flows that go from, computer system A to software system B, and it be fairly seamless. So really, really understand that. Is it scalable and rapidly elastic? So I think, can you continue to run your business for the long term with legacy applications? Sure. But you have to take a look at it from the business value perspective. So does some of the technology get in the way of things that are going to allow me to operate my business efficiently? Do I have to wait till I get back to a hotel room to close off my work orders, or can I do it there? Can I access this from anytime, anywhere? If I need to scale the system because I've added a whole bunch of users, or I've acquired a competitor, whatever the case may be, is that something easy to do, or do I have to buy a whole bunch of new servers and new licenses?
With the vendor itself, my thought is often too, and I welcome your thoughts on this, how much research and development resource is that hosted solution going to get? Will it get the same amount that a multi-tenant software as a service solution with this more modern, particularly if you've got a vendor that has the older, mature solutions and a software as a service solution where they're planning to migrate people over in that direction?
Oh, what an excellent point. So, as you go through your due diligence, it's more than understanding, it should be more than just understanding whether the software can support your specific business requirement today. Should have a sense of how your business is growing. And one of the things to look at, just like you've said, is understanding what the software development roadmap is for the application. Do they have a comprehensive roadmap as to how they're going to develop and enhance the product? What percentage of spend are they dumping into research and development on the specific application you're looking at? Really, really important questions to ask as you go through the due diligence. So glad you raised that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that people would be able to listen to this and come away feeling a little bit smarter and feeling a little bit more prepared to sit down with that construction software vendor and come to a good agreement that's going to benefit their agreement long term. You feel like that too?
I certainly hope so, because you spent a lot of time listening to me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it'll be less by the time I'm editing this down, but don't worry about it. But we'll have you back again soon. And if you like learning about how to get more out of technology in construction, how to mitigate the risk of implementing technology in construction, or if you just like to look at this guy, Jonathan Gross, keep coming back and we'll get you taken care of right here on Iron Pros.
Pleasure being here. Thanks, Chuck.